If you're wanting to make sourdough bread, either to just get away from grocery store dependence on processed yeast, or you're interested in reaping all of the health benefits that souring your grains can bring, you're going to need a sourdough starter. We don't all have access to a 200-year-old heirloom sourdough culture, and that is okay. You can really easily make one at home with just flour and water and a little bit of patience. So why would you choose to use sourdough to leaven your breads? Well, you can gain some independence from the grocery store. You do not have to buy yeast ever again if you know how to make your own sourdough starter at home. It's better for you, arguably. Instead of having one strain of commercially processed yeast, you have access to all of the wild yeasts in your environment. And also the souring process helps to break down your grains and make them more digestible. So many reasons that you may want to make your own sourdough starter. If you go wandering around the internet, you're going to find a lot of different methods for making your own sourdough starter. Some of them include raisins, honey, discards, all sorts of different things. And that's fine. Those methods are not bad, but it is more complicated than it needs to be, especially if you're starting with really fresh, whole ingredients. What I recommend using is a whole grain flour. Whatever kind of flour you want to use, if it is a whole grain, it's going to better nurture your little budding wild yeasts, and it's going to give you a stronger and quicker result. So I'm using a hard red wheat here in this recipe. I've also done this with rye, and I really love rye. It is a great nutritious source for your yeast. In fact, if you ever run into an issue where you have a really sluggish starter down the road, feeding it a little bit of rye can really help to just give it that extra pep and get it back on track. But you can do this with einkorn, white wheat, red wheat, spelt, any kind of grain, but a whole wheat really does work the very best. The bran, the germ, all of it works together to nurture those yeasts and give it the most complete food source. You're gonna end up with a really robust and fast maturing sourdough starter. The second thing you need is water. And the important thing to know about water is chlorinated is not gonna work here. Just like making other types of ferments, chlorinated water can inhibit the growth of those good bacteria and yeast and leave you really frustrated and with a sad, dismal product. So use a non-chlorinated, filtered, some kind of good water that doesn't have anything added to it that's going to inhibit those wild yeasts from really growing strong. The last thing you're gonna need is some kind of jar to start this in. So glass, ceramic, plastic works, but I prefer something like glass or ceramic. What will not work is stainless steel. That can react and kind of inhibit your ferment as well. So avoid stainless steel, use something else non-porous and easy to clean. I like to just use a mason jar, it works great. And then I personally use a old cloth napkin and a rubber band, but you could also just loosely set a lid on top. You don't want to screw a lid on all the way tight because it does need to breathe and release gases. And that's it. So you have all your materials gathered. What you need to do now is simply provide a hospitable environment for those natural yeasts to grow and flourish. What I start with is about a tablespoon of whole wheat flour, a tablespoon of water, I like it to be a little thicker than pancake batter consistency. And then I just put the cloth on top and set it aside somewhere warm, room temperature, and let it go 24 hours. The next day, you're gonna come back and you're gonna feed it again. Just a little bit of flour, a little bit of water. You can measure it out. You can go by equal parts grams. You can go equal parts of volume. You can eyeball it. As long as you are basically doubling the volume every day, or a little bit more than double, that's gonna be just fine. It really can be pretty flexible here. I like to keep it really small. I don't like maintaining a huge sourdough starter and having a lot of extra, but different people, different methods work for them. So you can scale this up or down to suit your needs. Keep repeating this process until you see a lot of great bubble activity, and after you feed your starter, you notice it double in size. You should be getting a good rise. And once you hit that point where you're getting that doubled in volume, nice and bubbly, good rise, then you know that it's time to start using your sourdough starter. Now, what I recommend for using your sourdough starter, first off, when it's fresh, it's not the strongest culture yet, is doing some things like pancakes, cakes, scones, things that you're not relying entirely on the sourdough for the leavening agent, is a really great way to just let your sourdough starter keep building strength and not get disappointed. If you go with a brand new baby starter straight into artisan loaves that are leavened only with your sourdough starter, you might be a little disappointed. You might have some dense loaves. And that's not necessarily your fault or your sourdough starter's fault, but it can be discouraging. So I'd start with some things like batter breads, pancakes, things like that, just for the first few weeks while your sourdough starter gets nice and strong, and then move on to using it in your artisan bread loaves. I did a video a little while ago that I will link that has 3 of my favorite easy sourdough recipes. This is also a really great book if you're looking for a sourdough book. There are a ton of phenomenal sourdough resources out there, but I particularly enjoy this book. She has a really different method for starting a sourdough starter than I showed you today. It's not for me. It uses a lot of flour, and I tried it and I found it hard to maintain. It, like I said, wasn't for me. But if you want to try her method, it's definitely a valid option. And I have not made a single recipe out of this book that I didn't enjoy. Tons of wonderful recipes in there. And you can probably find that from your local library, or I'll link it in the description as well. Once your starter's nice and active, you don't have to keep feeding it every day. So what I personally do is I discard or use up in a recipe, basically is what that means, all but 1 or 2 tablespoons of my starter. Every time I use it, I use everything but 1 or 2 tablespoons in my recipe. I feed that 1 or 2 tablespoons and I stick it in my refrigerator. And I leave it there for a week or 2. I've even left it up to 3 weeks in the refrigerator. And then I pull it out, feed it, and use it to bake again. I don't really have a warm-up time where I feed it for multiple days out of the refrigerator, and that works really well for me. Just straight from the fridge, feed it however much I need to make the quantity for my recipe, use that in my recipe, put that little bit back in the fridge. I maintain a really small starter, and that works well for me. But like I said, there's a million different methods, and you should find the method that works for you. It really is as simple as that. Water, good flour, air, and a little bit of patience, and you can have a beautiful, robust sourdough starter that you made from your own wild yeasts. I hope you enjoyed. I hope this was encouraging and informative, and you feel inspired to go out and make your own sourdough starter. If you do, you know, a sourdough starter needs a good name. So let me know in the comments what you name your sourdough starter. Mine is Eugene, and he has been wonderful for many, many years. And with that, I'll see you guys next time.